afternoon, everybody. Today we are talking about KPIs, and some people go, "What the hell is a KPI?" And some people go, "I know exactly what they are." And some people don't like them, and some people do like them. But before we start anything, I'm going to talk about what my definition of a KPI is, and it's a key performance indicator. And all that means to me is, am I going in the direction that I'm wanting to towards my goal? Last time I was talking about this, and I talk about this a lot because I work with businesses helping them to hit their marks, to grow, to become profitable, to build their business so that they have teams that are profitable. And when I say profitable, I mean making their marks the way they want to, hitting their income earnings the way they want to, having the success that they want to. And so there's many different ways to talk about what success is, but it usually boils down to we make some kind of goal, we make some kind of idea that we want off in the future, and we're actually making progress towards that. And so KPIs are kind of like mile markers on the road. That's kind of what I think about them. Are we moving in the direction we want to? When we're going north, are we actually seeing the markers go up towards where we're wanting to go? If we're going south, are the numbers going down the way we want them to go? And so that's what we're talking about with KPIs. Now, I've heard a lot of people say that KPIs are bad. If you're measuring too much, you're running your team too hard, you're doing uh, something wrong by trying to measure what they're doing, and you're coming down hard. And we're not talking about the idea of micromanaging people. We're not talking about the idea of making people hit marks. We're talking about, as a team or as an individual, coming up with what we want to see as a goal. We want to come up with understanding how we're going to get there. And so Christine and hi, how are you doing, Mark? Can you hear us? That's a maybe. Mark has joined us. I'm not sure if he can hear us, but we're talking about KPIs, and we're talking about moving in the direction we're looking for. Looks like Mark can hear us now. And so Christine is my partner with Generator Coaching. We are one of the coaches that are in Boomerang Give to Get, and we're talking about falling in love with KPIs. The biggest reason people have problems with KPIs and don't like them is because somebody else put them on them. Somebody came in from outside, either some consultant agency, or the management came to the person and said, these are the marks you have to make. And there's no buy-in, there's no enrollment, there's no agreement, there's no alignment with the person that has the KPI or the performance indicator, the mark, the benchmark. And so they feel like they're dominated by these marks, and they don't know how to move forward towards them because they've actually got a fight going on inside of themselves with trying to make a mark and at the same time feeling like it's not their mark to make. And so how do we fall in love with KPIs? Well, the first way is you stop thinking about what the benchmarks are going to be, and you start working with your team, or you work with yourself, or you work with your coach on really identifying what you're looking for on the path to whatever success it is. You define success. When I talk about this, I talked about it with Mauro last week, and I think I even talked about it with Bruce before, is I think about goals as the end place that we're going, like a grocery store. And then we're talking about mapping that out from where I'm at, like I'm at my house and I'm going to go to the grocery store. The grocery store is the end mark. The KPIs are all of the turns and all of the streets that I move towards to get there. And so what are my KPIs? When I start looking in my business, I want to hit a certain amount of money. I want to hit a certain amount of clients. I want to hit a certain amount of uh, exposure, however it is, these different things that I want to hit. And so how do we go about getting that alignment? The first thing you do is you start working with your team on what's really their understanding. And we were actually having a conversation for a few minutes right before we started this session about talking to one of the people in our group about what they're thinking versus what we're thinking, and when we're not agreeing on something or we're not understanding, and it's asking more questions. And so the whole idea is we have an end goal of having somebody sign up and start working with us or something. Well, how are we going to go about doing that? How are we going to go about making sure that they understand what we're talking about and they understand, or we understand what they're talking about? That starts with the conversation, and it always starts with questions. Because if we're talking too much, like I am right now, in fact, there's not a whole lot of listening. So there's not a whole lot of understanding the other side of the view. When we start asking questions, we can start getting much more clear around what the other person's thinking. And so whenever I start with my clients, working with them, whether they're entrepreneurs or they're the bigger businesses that we work with, we start out with a strategy session that's more of like a discovery diagnosis session about what they're going through and what they want to have happening that's not happening now. And so when we start to understand what they want, we get the idea, okay, this is where they want to go. That's the grocery store in the idea. Or if we're talking about, we use a metaphor called the bullet train, and we talk about the bullet train of action towards your success. And so what stop do you find success? We're at this first stop right here talking to you, and you're maybe 6 stops down the road. So what are the performance indicators going to show us that you're moving forward? Now, for our business, we have a number of different KPIs that we look at. We look at what we want to earn annually, what we want to earn monthly, what we want to earn weekly. We have basically how many sales calls that we need to make to be able to enroll the amount of people that we want to in order to do that. And it looks something like this. And so we talk about how many sales calls we need to move them to, or how many connection calls we want to have sales calls to move them into our programs. And so we have all kinds of different things, and then we gamify it. But before we ever make any of these calls, we start to really get clear on what we're looking for. And so we start with something as simple as this. This is our annual numbers. And so if we want to make $600,000 at over 12 months, I believe we have $50,000 a month. And so then our average price is 18 on our high program and 5 on our low program. And so how much do we need to do to get people into those, so that we know exactly how many we need for our high end program and exactly how many we need for our low end program. And then we know exactly how many we need to sell. Now we understand our numbers. Once you understand your numbers, then you can move into getting rid of the numbers, and we just go to bubbles. Why?
On a scale of 1 to 5, would you give yourself a 5 on achieving what you want in life? If your answer is anything less than a 5, right now, I have something awesome for you. Achieving your goals and living your life at a 5 isn't easy. Most people aren't prepared to focus, stay disciplined, and do the everyday work that is necessary to achieve amazing results. But since you're watching this, then I'm guessing that you're not one of those people. And this is an opportunity that will change your life. Give to Get is a global program that brings together world-class coaching and combines it with empowering masterminds and networking opportunities. We provide 5-star guidance for the price of a cup of coffee a day. To find out more, click on the link in the description of this coaching session.
Because they're fun. Bubbles are fun. And the fact of the matter is bubbles, I don't think anybody there is scared of bubbles. But when we got to start hitting $50,000, that's kind of scary. But if I just got to knock a bubble off a chart, I can very easily knock a bubble off. What do I got to do that? I got to make a phone call. One phone call knocks off one bubble. And if I do enough bubbles, I get enough phone calls, and then I start moving towards my goals very easy. And so when we're thinking about simple numbers, when we're working with a group of calls that we have to do to hit a certain goal, it becomes much more gamified. And so Christine and I, for months and months, have been working with a bubble chart rather than these big numbers. And we don't even look at the numbers anymore, except for the beginning of the month. Okay, what are our numbers last month? What are our numbers this month? How much do we want to increase? How many more bubbles do we need to fill in? And the reality is there's also very simple numbers that sales has that go basically, if you're bad at sales, if you're very, very bad at sales, you can get about 10% close. If you're getting to be a place of norm, you're around 20%, and pretty darn good is 35% to 40%. And then if you get to 40% or more, you're priced too low. And so that's how the numbers work on average in most sales situations. And if you want a reference for that, Google is good. It's all over Google. They tell you exactly those kind of numbers. And some people on Google are going to say they're a little higher, some people are going to say a little lower. But the fact of the matter is if you are new to sales, you should be able to do 10%. So you start out there and then make the phone calls. And if you have a nice little bubble chart like this of all of the people you should be able to call, that number represents how many we have to call to make our numbers at 10%. And so then if we make them 10%, awesome. If we make them at 20%, it was faster. If we make them at 30%, we're celebrating and we're even faster. And so we just go for 10% numbers because it's really easy that we know we're going to be making those amounts of phone calls. Now, how do you fall in love with this? Well, it's simple. And I'm only talking about sales right now. There's all kinds of different KPIs. But in the sales department, what we're talking about is when this makes sense and it's easy, it's something to fall into, something to automate in a routine that I just know I need to make 10 phone calls today, or I know I need to make 15 phone calls today. And then I move them to the next step in the process. It becomes very process driven, process oriented, and it removes the thinking hard so that we can actually be involved in the conversations and have a good time and have a good conversation with everybody we talk to. And so because we have numbers and we know what they are, there's a level of stress that's completely reduced and removed from the process of sales. Then it's just about, okay, how do I have that conversation? And I know that Mauro and I know that Bruce are both salespeople, and they've had sales conversations throughout their career over and over and over. As myself, I have too. And what I found is that the more you understand your sales process, the easier it is to have a conversation. But if you don't know your numbers and you don't know how to have a sales conversation, the stress level goes up every time you don't know something. Because where stress comes from is the desire, and this is maybe a writer downer, but stress comes from the desire to perform at a level and the fear that you're not going to perform at that level. It's because you care. If you don't care, you don't have stress. So if you notice you have stress, realize you care and you're missing some kind of information. And so one of the things that we're doing with Give to Get is presenting all of this different information. And some of it's kind of dry and boring, and some of it's really fun. The reality is when you take some of that dry and boring stuff and start actually putting it into action, it starts to make your life more fun because you have simple, easy ways to move forward. The numbers, the KPIs that we use, the way we use them are very simple. You just write down how many calls that you need to make, or first you start with the numbers that you need to make to sell, how much you ever have to do so that you have an amount of money at the end of the month or start at the year, end of the month, and then move through that and then make a nice little bubble chart just like we did. If you don't know how, well, reach out to us. We'll show you how to do it. And that's how you do with sales. Then we actually have benchmarks for how we're doing with customer service, how we're doing with our offerings, and all of the different things that we do in our business. How many connections we make for other people. I actually keep a record of how many connections and how many networking connections that I make with other people to make sure, because one of the things that we promise is resources, relationships, results as generator coaching. And so how many people did I hook up with resources? Who am I connecting people with? How am I connecting them? How am I helping them to grow faster by the relationships that they're creating? Now, I won't stay in the relationship necessarily, but I make sure that I'm connecting at least 1 or 2 people a week, depending on what my schedule is, because I find that my business grows when I connect other businesses together. And so for me, there's a KPI in there. And the more that I follow these and pay attention to them, the more my business grows, the more my network grows, the more relationships grow. And that's what this is all about. Business is all about relationships. Business is all about growth. It's connecting people. And that's how me and Morrow met. And Morrow then introduced me to Bruce. And so we all start meeting each other and seeing, okay, who do I know that's going to be benefiting from Morrow? Who do I know that Bruce can help? Who do I know that Mark could help? Well, first I have to get to know Mark and find out what he's about and what he does and how he can fit into some kind of situation. And so when I'm looking at who is involved in the network, who is involved in my network that I can connect with, it's a major thing. One of the other KPIs that Christine and I are very, very focused on is, believe it or not, networking. How much do we connect with other people in networking events? That is hilarious that Mark told us that Mark is awesome. I think Mark is awesome too, because he is able to say he's awesome. But I just swooped back in today about 35 minutes ago from a networking event. It was a golf tournament that we were sponsoring and we were volunteering at. Excuse me. And we went there and we met about 50 to 60 different businesses that are participating in the golf tournament. And so how can we be of service? And so we look at how many connections we made, how many conversations we had, who is doing what, and who are they doing it with? How are we going to bring them business? How are we going to connect them with other businesses that are doing similar things that could benefit from what they're doing? And so we have a very, very clear picture of how many connections we're looking for. And one of my personal connections is who in the chambers that I work around, because we have about 4 different chamber of commerce in our area. Who do I know in those chambers that can get me to the top dogs so that I can start working with them? Because the higher you go in the chambers, the more you're going to know. And so how can I be of service to them? Not how can they give me business, but how can I be of service to them so that I am one of the first people they think about when they have a problem? Maybe Terry has an answer. And so this is how we do our networking. And our networking is very, very thought out and very, very intentional in how we work with who we work with. When we started our business, probably a few years back, I can't remember exactly when, I think 2017, we started working on the business that is now Generator Coaching. And it's gone a few different renditions, but we didn't have any ideas of KPIs the same way we do today. We didn't have the ideas of what we were really focusing on or how were we going about doing it. And we found it very difficult to, one, talk about what we did the way we talk about it now. And two, we found it very difficult to really know where we were going or how to get there because we didn't track numbers and we didn't understand that. We just knew that we could help people grow. It's a great thing to know, but if you don't know how much you can help them grow, if you don't know what types of people you can help grow or how you're going to help them grow, you have to put some ideas into effect of, okay, what does it look like? What does that really mean? And I think I'm going to open it up a little bit to have more of a conversation now that I've talked for about 20 minutes and really talk about more about what KPIs are to you folks, and then how you find them playing out and what happens when you're using them and what happens when you're not using them. And we'll go on with the conversation as we go. So Morrow, I know you have a business that has a lot of friggin' numbers involved with CanMade because you have orders galore with all kinds of different stuff. What have you found about KPIs?
They're definitely they're keys to keeping you on track. The sad part is I've only recently learned about them. So for the longest time, we're running the business without having these performance indicators. Now we use them for our purchasing, we use them for our sales, we use them for our expenses, we use them across the board, and it keeps us on track every step of the way, which now makes us more profitable, which which puts us in the direction. So we know where we need to focus our attention on. So for us, it's a lot of our key performance indicators are in the dollars. It doesn't matter where, but it's in the dollars.
Right. One of the really interesting things that you said is we have a lot of numbers and we weren't using them before. And a lot of times what we end up doing is we end up thinking that inventory is just inventory. Or I don't know if anybody's ever worked in a restaurant, but in the restaurants, they do food cost. Well, that's a key performance indicator, because if your inventory is off, your performance around paying attention to your inventory or your indicators around food costs, we're burning too much food, or we're throwing away, we're letting it go bad. That's a performance indicator of how you're doing with the attention to the food or the attention to the inventory. And so the inventory is something that's like different, but it's in the same vein of a performance indicator. Because if you're not paying attention and you're not performing at the level that you need to with the inventory, then oh, my inventory's off. Well, I need to be more attentive to what I'm doing with my inventory. If things are breaking, I need to identify that those are broken. If food is going bad, then I need to be able to identify what's going on. Maybe I got a fridge bad, or I'm buying too much or I'm buying too little. And then my performance around identifying what I need and what I need to bring in and what I need to stop ordering, that's a performance indicator. At the same time, is like, how well am I doing this job of keeping track of my stuff? And so when we start to really focus on that, we start to be able to make more money because we're not losing it through the cracks. Bruce, I know that you've been doing business for 30 years. What can you talk about with performance indicators and the love-hate relationship we have with them?
Well, I'm even going to go back to your example, Terry, with yourself. You're you've proven yourself exactly what you're talking about today. You started the business, you really didn't understand KPIs, you started to work with KPIs. And now KPIs are part of the business where you'd probably never go away from them right now because you've gone on that journey of quote unquote falling in love with your KPIs so your KPIs can love you back. And literally that is the process. And ultimately, I'll paraphrase, but then I'll ask you some questions too, Terry, where by going on that journey, you're now what I'll say married to your KPIs. They're part of you, they're part of the business. You interact with them on a daily basis. And if I ask the question, do you understand what's going on in the business much better today after working with the KPIs for 3 or 4 years than you did, quote unquote, 3 or 4 years ago when you just started?
Oh, heck yeah. And not only that, it brings a level of expertise in when you start understanding your numbers, because what used to be a shot in the dark or trying to, I don't know if anybody's ever shot a bow and arrow, but it's kind of like shooting the bow and arrow in the dark when you don't have the KPIs. And so you're not exactly sure where you're shooting, but something's going to get hit. And so, and it could be bad. It could be your partner. It could,
I
it could
I,
be a cop.
I, I
Um,
kind of laugh. I kind of laugh on that one, Terry, because I say something similar. I say, "You hear about the guy that shot the arrow in the sky the other day?" They go, "No, yeah, he missed."
yeah, right. And so it's so helpful when we have these, because we know where we're going. And like I said, most business owners are stressed out, and it's because they care a lot, but it's also because they're not handling all of the different pieces in ways that make it simple, because business is really simple. I was talking to somebody else that was talking about business is complicated. And I said, if that's the story you want to believe, but really what complicates it is the way we talk to ourselves about what we're doing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it's funny because what we were talking about, this particular guy, he's in his 30s, he's doing really well in real estate, and he's expecting a kid in about 3 months. And what he was talking about to me was, well, how am I going to handle it when the kid's born? Because all of these people tell me that it's going to be hard. I'm not going to have any sleep, and I'm going to have these problems, and the kid's going to need a lot of attention. We're going to need a lot of money. And I was like, okay, so what's really going on isn't fact. It's a bunch of what ifs. And I talk about what ifs as the dreaded what ifs. They're all of the fears that are happening, but you cannot cross a bridge before you get to it. And so what you want to do is you want to dial it back and go, okay, what attitude do I want to come with fatherhood at? Do I want to come with the kid's a burden and it's going to be a pain in my butt? And I'm going to have to be up at 4 a.m. to try to make this kid go back to sleep? Or am I going to enjoy fatherhood and I'm going to be excited that I get to spend time with my kid, even though they're crying and I need to put them back to sleep and I need to get up in the morning? I get to enjoy this time with them. And that's just a shift of how you think about it. And I think that KPIs are the same way. They're like the crying kid, right? In the beginning, they seem really annoying and they seem really bothersome because, oh my God, I got to pay attention to this. But when you realize that you spend a little bit extra time paying attention to them, making sure that you're there for every one of them and being very intentional with them, as you grow up with your KPIs, you begin to realize that those are the things that made you successful. Those are the things that kept you on track. Those are the things that kept you rolling down the track at a faster and faster pace because you don't have to stress out on what might happen. The dreaded what ifs go away because you have a clear picture.
Well, and they keep you focused on the business too, Terry. You talk about sales calls for argument's sake. So I would venture a guess that if you looked at your KPIs for this week, and let's say they were either plus or minus 5% of where you wanted to be, you'd probably have a pretty good idea of what's going on in the business, correct?
Yeah, very
How
much so.
come?
Well, because if you're minus, you haven't been doing some of the things that you need to. And if you're plus, then you've been doubling down at least in some area. And so if it's sales calls, I need to make 15 sales calls today. Well, if I'm plus 5%, then I've over exceeded that time and it's never going to hurt me to over exceed that. But then the question is if I'm over exceeding there, am I missing something else? And what other KPIs do I have to look at? And so it really keeps us on track. It's very much like a calendar of uh,
Yeah.
appointments. And so how am I doing with each one today?
So let me ask you a question from that point of view. Is it really more important the number themselves that are the KPIs or the story behind the numbers that the KPIs are telling?
I think it really is the story that they're telling. But then again, if you don't have the numbers, you can't tell the story.
And that's the whole point. And that's where, by understanding your numbers and what I'll say, falling in love with them and understanding the story behind, as a business owner or this real estate professional or sales professional, then starts to understand, now I need to know what to do to get the numbers going the way I want to do, because they understand the stories behind the number. Whenever I work with anybody, I always like to coach them on what's the story behind the number? What's the number telling you? Couldn't care less about the number per se in the beginning. What's the number telling you? Because the more you understand what the number is telling you and how it's impacting in the business, as a business owner, as a sales professional, as quote unquote an operational professional, you can then go make the adjustments to move the numbers in the way you want. And
Exactly.
then it becomes a thing of mastery, because then you really start to know what lever I need to pull on, what rope I need to push on, and so on and so forth to achieve ultimately what you want. But you got to start somewhere. And you know, you've probably gone to a number of, I'll say, sporting events with Christine as well too. Without any training, Terry, intuitively, how many times do you look at the scoreboard?
Oh, often,
How come?
often.
How come?
Um,
How come? Without anybody,
uh,
like, nobody told you to look at the scoreboard, right? Nobody said, Terry, go to the game and look at the scoreboard every 5 minutes,
you
right?
simply want to know who's winning. I mean, that's
And this is where I'll say, to a lot of business owners, what's your scorecard in the business?
yep,
Because you're gonna go watch, quote unquote, a professional team play. By nature, you're gonna look at the scorecard because you're interested.
right.
Well, this what business that you're running allows you to buy the tickets to go to that sporting event. What's your scorecard? And then, like Morrow, we always start with the financial scorecard. And then from the financial scorecard goes to the sales scorecard, goes to the operational scorecard, goes to the purchasing scorecard, goes to the expense score. And then that effectively becomes the scoreboard for
Yep.
the whole business. And you're in a position now where, as a business owner, you can look at your numbers once a week for about 15, 20 minutes, and you can tell exactly what's happening in the business and what you need to go do and focus on the other side of that 20-minute, I'll say, love affair with your KPIs.
Right. One of a few of the others that we look at is how is your attrition rate with your employees? How is your attrition rate with your customers or your retention rate on the other side?
Absolutely.
And so looking at how you're doing with that. And then we also ask what we call questions of service. And we talk about the different ways that we're being of service and what
Yeah.
people like and don't like
Yeah.
and have those continuous conversations.
Yeah.
And so that's a KPI as well as how many
Yeah.
of those conversations have we had. And then the data from that really pulling in and understanding how we need to turn and how we need to
Yeah.
change our business
Yep.
in order to be able to be that iconic service.
How many business owners in your mind, Terry, would like to, what I'll say, increase their sales minimally by 20% every year?
I think every business would.
Absolutely. Two simple KPIs. One, what's your average transaction sale?
Yep.
What's your average sale? How much is your average sale? Whatever it is, $20, $100, $1,000, $2,000, whatever your average sale is. If you have that KPI, now you can say, okay, I want to increase that by 10% every year. If it's $100, just increase it to 110.
Yep.
If it's $50, increase it to 55. Okay.
Yep.
You're increasing your sales by 10%. The other is, how often does your customer buy?
Yep.
Does your customer buy once a month, twice a month, 3 times a month? By simply knowing that your customer buys X amount of times a month, and let's assume it's just 4 times a month, that's fine. So once a week, how can I get them to, what I'll say, increase by 10%, 4.5 times a month? And if you do those two things as a business owner and simply track those two KPIs, you'll increase your sales 20% every year, year over year.
Yeah, we actually when we're talking to businesses, one of the things we talk about is how is your leads? If you could increase your leads by 10% and not just leads, but actual qualified buyers, people in the buying
Absolutely.
cycle.
Yep.
If you could close 10% more sales,
Yep.
what would that do? If you could retain or reactivate 10% more of your customer base,
Uh-huh.
what would that be worth? Now think about that because if you're able to attract 10% more qualified leads and then you have 10% more sales and then you retain 10% more of your client base, you have overall about 33% increase in your business.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
so if you do that month over month, now you've got a very, very, very strong business that's generating more and more. The other piece is as you really focus on your leads and focus on your retention of your customers, you're going to have more repeat sales. You're going to have more reactivation. People are going to talk about you more. You're going to start
Mhm.
moving forward on both of these tracks, and the sales just start doing themselves.
And it's all simple little increments. Again, you've heard me say it before. We say it ad nauseum at times. Inch by inch, it becomes a cinch. Stop trying to throw a Hail Mary on every play. Get 1 or 2 yards every play.
Yep,
You'll move the ball down the field and you score a lot of touchdowns.
exactly. Exactly. And one of the big things that Christine and I focus on is when we're talking about working with businesses, most of the time when you're not focusing on your KPIs is because you forgot about you. There's something going on with you and you get distracted easy as the business owner. And so we start with the business owner and then we look at the team. How well is the
Absolutely.
communication with the team? How well is the team working to be aligned with what they're doing? And so alignment with yourself first, your emotions, your thinking, your actions. Is everything in alignment? Then your team, are they working in the same way? Is everybody working towards the same goals? Is everybody working on the same mission? Can they all say the same mission? It's amazing how many times we've gone and talked to people in the same business. You go, okay, what's your mission? And everybody's got a different mission out of their words. And it's like, wait a minute, I thought you guys worked the same place. And so being able to have everybody saying the same things, moving the same direction, that is a key performance indicator that the executive team is communicating well. And so
Huge.
that's one of the big things that we look at is how is the communication from top down and then across the executive team. Then once we have that made sure that that's working, then we move into, okay, now how do you promote yourself in getting leads? Are you saying the things that you need to be saying so that people really understand what you do, why you do it, and why they should work with you? And then moving into the sales conversation, same thing. We really make sure that anybody who's selling the same product has the same pitch of variance. And so are they really promoting the same business, or do two different people do it different ways? Because you can get a lot of different businesses. You can get one person who's just rocking it out and another person who's not selling anything. And it's because they're saying different things, or they're not committed to the aligned goal or mission that the people are involved in. And so when we really focus and hone in on that, it really comes into, is this person working with the same parameters as this person? And when everybody starts working together in the same way, we start to see that bullet train of action moving towards the goals we're looking for.
And when there's a misstep, it's a whole lot easier to do the assessment
Oh
and the
my,
realignment because everybody's doing the same thing.
it's very easy.
It's a scientific experiment where we're changing one variable at a time to see if it's producing success for us, as opposed to remaking the birthday cake every time and not sure what we're getting.
Exactly. And that goes back to what I was talking about last week with the 3 E's: explore, experiment, and experience. And so if we're
Exactly.
experiencing a different result, then we have to go and see where we made a change in the experiment. We have to explore what we did differently. And when we can
Yep.
explore that difference, oh, there's where we made the change. Did the change, and actually really explore, did the change actually bring something good?
Yep.
Rerun the experiment that way and see if it continues to bring a different result
Exactly.
that we like.
Yep.
If we like the result, then we move everybody that way. If we don't like a result and there's some problem, then we go, okay, where was the change? We remove that change. And that's one of the things that Christina and I talk a lot about with Generator is we actually remove the trash, the head trash, remove the emotional waste. We remove all of that stuff off the track so you can move faster. And so what is it that you put on your track that slowed you down or created hesitation or created procrastination for you
Yep.
on your way to your numbers? And
Yep.
so we remove that and then get back in line, and we start to see the numbers come back
Less is more, and slow is fast.
a lot of times.
Yeah, clean out all that junk in the head, because a confused mind does nothing.
No,
And what's
a confused mind spins in circles.
exactly? And what's the one bad thing about doing nothing? You're never quite sure when you're finished.
Yeah, I don't even know how to answer that.
Well, you just never know when you're finished doing nothing.
That's funny. That is super funny, Bruce. So really, when we get down to it, KPIs are simply the street signs of where we're at, how we get there, where we want to go. And I would, in looking, because I always take 15 or 20 minutes to research this when I'm talking, because I can talk about the topic, but I like to see what other people have said about it. And there was one lady that actually posted the KPIs are bad. And so how could KPIs be bad? And they can be. It's when I decide for my team what their KPIs are going to be, and they're going to be in trouble if they don't make them. And that's what you call poor management. It's not poor KPIs, because the KPIs could be great.
That's
But
right.
the poor manager didn't, and when I say poor manager, I mean, oh, poor manager, he blew it. He just isn't realizing, or she just isn't realizing that they have to enroll people into and get the person excited about the different marks they're going to make, and then really encourage them and enroll them in hitting those marks from a challenging point of view, rather than, and I don't mean like I challenge you to do it, but I mean, do you think you can hit those?
That's right.
exciting them, moving them into that excited, I want to try kind of place. I want to do this experiment. I want to see what happens when I hit these numbers. I want to see what I can do to challenge myself to move forward. And when you get your team moving forward in that way, then KPIs are amazing because they are the mile markers on your way to success.
I find the other big mistake that a lot of business owners make with KPIs that doesn't, I'll say, align with their team is, and I'm going to be, I'll say, facetious to make my point. They have 400 KPIs
Yes.
instead of 4 to 6 KPIs.
Yes.
You don't need to be measuring everything in the business. You do need to be measuring the top 4 or 5, 5 or 6 that are really going to, and that's why they're called key, that drives the business forward.
Yes. That is such a great point, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was actually reading a book by one of the people that I really respect in the business, Patrick Lencioni, I think his name is.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and he was talking about that very thing of a business. Everything is some kind of key performance indicator, or everything
Yeah.
is a goal. And when everything's a goal and you have 400 different things that you're trying to go for, you're never going to hit any of them.
Yep.
And so it's really
Yeah.
department by department, what are the real goals? And then he actually says that everybody in every department is a member of the executive team through the executives. And so it's a top-down procedure, but everybody's going through the mission, everybody's going from the same values. And so each person on the executive team, their first team is the executive team, and then their departments may be their team.
That's right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the marketing department executive, the executive team is their thing. So
Yeah.
the chief marketing officer, their first team is the executive team. Then they bring the KPIs for the business, and then the marketing department comes with theirs, and they all feed into the overall top line. What is our KPIs? What is our one thing we're going to do? And Garrett Keller talks about the one thing all the time. What is our one goal of the year? Great. What are the key performance indicators that we're hitting that? We have,
And,
like you said, 4.
and how are we making the one thing the one thing?
Exactly. How are we
Yeah.
removing everything else that isn't that?
Yeah.
And
Mauro and I, we spend 20 minutes every Wednesday morning, have for the last year and a half now. And really, we've got, I'll say, 5 KPIs that we look at. Having said that, it's really 3 KPIs, and 2 of them are generated off those 3 numbers. And that's all we look at. Month to date, year to date, those 3 KPIs. Again, it focuses our conversation, it focuses our thought process, and it allows us, and particularly Mauro, at the end of those 20 minutes, to know exactly what's going on in the business and what he needs to do or not needs to do in order to keep moving in the right direction.
right,
Essentially, he falls in love with his numbers.
exactly. I think the great thing about it is it's really bringing us into what is our action steps to move forward. We just know what streets we're going to drive down. We know what turns we're going to take when we know our numbers. And so having that time, and I suggest that with every team, is to have that 20 minutes a week to go, okay, what are our numbers? Where are we at with them? How are we doing with them? What aren't we doing that we could be doing to make them? And then really committing to ourselves. And one of the things that drives me a little crazy is people talking about accountability all of the time instead of personal responsibility. And I think when I know my numbers, I can have that personal responsibility. And then the accountability is really me writing down that I'm doing it. Accountability is me marking the circle off that I did it. Responsibility is me doing that. Accountability is me actually writing it down. I am accountable. It's on my accounting sheet. But we have actually taken a turn with accountability, and we've started using that as a way of pushing people into things and asking them why they're not, in usually a little too harsh a way that makes people start to back away and start to not love the numbers. And so it's really, for me, when I find people aren't hitting them, the first question that I always ask is, okay, what's in the way? Was this KPI too hard? Was this goal too hard for you? Or is there something in the way of it? What's stopping you from hitting that mark? And like we were talking about before the call started, in that little couple of minutes when I jumped in, it's really asking those questions, because a lot of times there's just trash on the track. And we're not hitting our numbers because there's trash on the track, not because we're bad people and we need to be held accountable, but there's trash on our track and we're paying more attention to that than our numbers. And so how can I, as a partner of yours, help you to remove the trash so you can hit your numbers very easily? And so for me, it becomes much more, I like the term progress partner rather than accountability partner, because it's really about how are you progressing towards your numbers? How are you progressing towards what you want to do? And the reality is sometimes there are longer buying cycles than shorter, and we're not going to be able to make a sale every day. But what have you done to move yourself towards those sales? What have you done to connect with those people on the bubble chart, so to speak? And so what have you done to make these calls for this day? What have you done that's moved those calls into a next call if they're not a yes yet? They're thinking about it. They're not ready to move forward. They're willing, they're able, they're even committed, but they're not ready. Great. What's going to make you ready? Oh, they're ready, but they're not committed totally. Well, then you're not actually ready. And so those are, for me, those are 4 performance indicators that I have with every phone call when I'm in sales is, are they willing? Are they able? Are they ready? Are they committed? If one of those indicators is off, then it's not a sale. And so then we know exactly where to go. It's so simple when we know what we're looking for, when we know what those indications are. It's so simple because, oh, I need one more person to hit my marks. Simple. I don't know how many I need to call. Well, that's a lot of calls then. And so
That's the anxiety about crossing the bridge before you get there.
Exactly. I think that's going to be one of my next books. I use that phrase all the time. It's funny that came up when I was actually acting as a therapist. I had a client come in and he was wanting to do public speaking, but he was terrified of people. And I asked him how this shows up different places, and he's like, "Well, every time I'm coming up to the bridge, I start to freak out across bridges too. It doesn't matter what bridge it is. Before I get there, I just freak out that I'm going to fall off of it." And I'm like, you just can't cross the bridge before you get there, dude. So why would you even worry about falling off a bridge before you get to the edge of it? And he's like, I never thought about it like that. He's like, so I only need to be nervous on the bridge. And I was like, that would be a good start to making the rest of your day real good.
Good.
But then once you get to the bridge, why don't you focus on staying on the bridge instead of falling off?
Exactly.
I never thought of that. It's like, it's the simple things. And that's what our brains do. Our brains come up with the strangest things. And one of the funniest things that I've heard for years is other psychologists, I'm a psychologist by trade, and all other psychologists talk about people having irrational thoughts. And I'm like, guys, that's the wrong way to think about it, if you think about it, because they actually are rational. They've thought this through. They have made sense of something. And so it's not an irrational thought. It's completely rational. It just started from a wrong place.
Right.
And so it's not useful for them. It's not resourceful for them, but it's very rational. They could tell you all about how they came up with it. So telling them they're irrational is mean, number one. And number two, it doesn't get you anywhere other than having the people really lock into what they believe. And so as soon as you go, okay, that's totally rational the way you think about it. What if the first thought was wrong? Oh, well, that changes.
Well, and that's another good thing too. Another good point, both in business and in life, Terry. You don't get what you want, you get what you believe.
Exactly. And a lot of us, we come up with beliefs that work for us one time way back in our past. and then we held on to it and we took it through and just lived with that idea because it worked that first time, but it doesn't mean it's going to work every time. But we use it as, hey, you know, it worked that one time, and we keep searching for it to work again. And that is a very, very good example of not using KPIs, because you're not using how it's performing over time. You're using it as a one static situation going, you know, it worked back in 1975. Well, yeah, but it hasn't worked for 30 years.
Well, and then to your other point that you talked about earlier too, because there's a lot of people that set KPIs based on what they want to do, but they don't believe they can ever get there. So they just keep almost what I'll say self-sabotaging themselves instead of starting with a KPI that they believe they can achieve. And then once they've achieved it, they prove themselves, they've got credibility within themselves, they've got confidence. Now go and stretch that.
Right. You know, Bruce, you bring up a good point, because I meet so many people, and I don't really work with entrepreneur coaches very much that want to build coaching practices, because, well, I think a lot of people believe they're called to be coaches. And I was having this conversation with one of my coaches, and she said, really, people that aren't not called to be coaches, they're really misunderstanding the calling, and the call is to go get a coach. It's so funny. It's like, freaking crack me up. It's like, you know what? That is exactly right. They have this overwhelming desire to get a coach, and then they think that it was actually them to be a coach, and it's they turn the messaging in their mind. But one of the things that I think about is these coaches come in and they start wanting to sell a package at $5,000 or $10,000 for, or equivalent to what I sell, you know, like a 6-month package. And I have one person who's selling 6 months, $1,000 a month. Have you sold that before? Well, one person bought it. Okay, great. That is not a proven system and a proven model. How many people are you talking to sell that? Well, I'm talking to a lot of people. Great. If it's not selling, either you're not actually having a great pitch, or you don't believe in yourself enough to pull $1,000 a month. And so you need to build some credibility. Try 400 a month. And then when you get 4 or 5 sales, then double it.
Yep.
Then move up and keep moving it up as you do it. And that's how I started my business. Is I started at a rate that I knew I could get. And then I moved it up, I think, by 25%. And then I moved it up by another 25%. And then I doubled it.
Exactly.
After that, when I got too busy. And so it was time, money, switch. But it was based on KPIs. It was based on how busy I was. And I knew that I could get it. So I felt that credibility anytime I had a conversation. Your point, exactly.
Great session, Terry. Thank you very much. If you want to just open up, if any of us, I'll say, have questions or comments, I know Caesar's been listening intently. He might have some questions for you. Mark might have some questions for you as well.
By all means.
Caesar, what questions do you have of Terry?
If any.
Am I on?
You are.
Can you hear?
You are on.
Okay. No,
Call the ball.
No, I really enjoyed everything that you guys were talking about, and I wish shortly that when I started the business back in 1976, I would have had a little bit of help from experts like you guys. It's so much more scientific. It's so much more, let's say, advanced, just like a modern day sports are. Everything is thought about, and everything is studied, and there's a lot of improvements in both the performance of athletes as well as the performance of business people and entrepreneurs. I really enjoyed the session, and I just wish I was born a little bit in that era where I could have taken advantage of some of these beautiful things that are available.
Thank you for the words.
Yes, thank you. Mark, any questions before we let Terry wrap up his session? Or,
No.
or I'll say, what questions do you have?
No, no, the subject was covered very well. Thank you. I have my own set of KPIs that I work from.
Did we lose you there, Mark?
Did he cut out, or was that just the end of the comment?
Think might have lost the.
Nope. Thank you,
There you
Terry.
go.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no, but the number one thing that I've ever told my team about KPIs is it's evidence. It's
Exactly.
evidence for where you're going, where you've been, where you're going, and whether or not what you're doing is efficient or effective or has quality to it. And it helps you give you that balance that you need. That's all I've ever taught about KPIs.
Yeah, I
Well,
couldn't agree more.
well said, Mark. Well said. Motto. Final comments or thoughts before we let Terry get on with his day.
You got to unmute.
I had to unmute. No, I just love everything I learned. Everything makes complete sense. I hope that, everybody they listen to this and they understand that having these KPIs are really the means to a successful business. And really, as much as people think about it for business, it's also for personal. A big part of it is personal, and how you run your household, how you run your finances. It's all the same stuff. So yes, we're talking about it for business, but it's also fantastic for personal.
Very, very, very true.
It really is. I mean, how many people have a scale? How many people pay attention to how much they eat? How much do they exercise? These are all personal KPIs. How am I doing today? When I first started really getting into personal development, that's one of the first things that I learned as a personal inventory of emotion and what you're thinking, and how are you doing today with those things, and are you taking care of what you need to take care of? And I think that's a real key to paying attention to how we're moving forward in our lives. Are we living our lives the way we want to? When we are, we're moving forward. When we're not, we're automatons, and we're just kind of moving around, not sure of what's next.
Yeah, and gotta have some sort of scoreboard in order to measure that, because to Mark's point, that's the evidence.
Exactly.
Okay. Great session, Terry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will see you next week.
Everybody have a great time.
Thanks,
Same
Terry.
back channel.
Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.